I wrote it because I wanted to read such a book and it didn't exist. I looked around and couldn't find it, and so I started collecting information, and I was fortunate to be able to travel everywhere. And as a result, I put this story together for myself because I didn't understand what is the heart of this region. And it was very exciting, extremely exciting to discover this as I went along. And I didn't only discover for myself places and eras, but people, just absolutely amazing individuals who, some of whom were writers, some of whom were thinkers, some of whom were poets, some of whom were religious thinkers, philosophers, scientists. They were all over the map. And I was so impressed with them, I wanted to tell their story and try to explain why this incredible flowering occurred and what happened to it. So that's how the book happened. I think the biggest surprise, there were two. One was the role of sheer genius in the region, real genius on a world scale. And Central Asians in every country can claim to have been the home of major world scale geniuses. And look at your currency in Kazakhstan. There you have it. Your national university records such a person. But there are others in every country. And that was my first big discovery. And it was discovery to me. Many other people knew this, of course, but it was a surprise and an exciting one. The second was this, to realize how these were not a bunch of soloists. These were people who were connected to each other, who were connected regionally. Yes, they had different religions. Yes, in many cases. Yes, they had different ethnicities. There were Turkic peoples, there were Persianate peoples. They all intermixed, and they all interacted and depended on each other. And so I, little by little, became aware that this is not a region of solo geniuses, but a region that encouraged this kind of great intellectual and cultural flowering. This is one of the great and most intriguing questions one can ask about Central Asia. You have these great cities, and they were truly great, not huge. They were rather small, dense cities, and they were rich. They were wealthy, and they traded with the whole world, and they issued coinage and so on. Then you had, even in the most settled areas of Central Asia, you had nomads out in the countryside. And the nomads controlled the countryside. This was their private property, if you will. This was where they lived, where they gained their wealth and their existence. Now, the only way that Central Asians, either nomads or urban Central Asians, could survive was to collaborate with the others. Without collaboration, nomadic and settled people, neither could have thrived. And yet they both thrived because of this very subtle interaction. And by the way, this was also an interlinguistic and intercultural interaction, in that many of the urban settlements had a large Persianate population, speaking what we can now call Tajik and related languages, whereas most of the nomads were Turkic. Yet their interaction was very intense. It was economic. It was very practical. Urban people could not prosper without selling their goods to nomads. Nomads couldn't prosper without selling their goods to urban people. So their interaction. But it also included serious cultural, intellectual interaction. And the most obvious and dramatic example of this is the entire phenomenon of Sufism in Central Asia. And this, even though it has roots that can be traced in part to the Buddhism that was very widespread before the onslaught of the Arab invasion, even though it had certain roots in Buddhism, its strongest, deepest roots came from the nomadic cultures. We have to say this bluntly, that the nomads transformed the religious and philosophical consciousness of all Central Asia. They did it from the countryside, and why? Because they had very specific views of the universe, their place in it, Tengrianism and so forth. This is very specific. And when they absorbed Christianity, when they then absorbed Islam, they brought this mentality to it and transformed it. And you can see the impact of that transformation all over the world today. Every society on earth is asking, how do we become completely modern and yet preserve the best of who we have been over the centuries? And this is a huge challenge in Central Asia, and I would say specifically today and specifically since the collapse of the USSR. This is challenge number one, in a way, along with sovereignty itself. Why do I say that? Because if you consider this extraordinarily rich cultural heritage, that is a heritage in literature, it's a heritage in art, it's a heritage in philosophy and science, you name it. When you consider that, and you also have to acknowledge that it's very fragile. It can be lost. Or you can fail to regain it, to rediscover it if it has already been lost earlier. It's fragile. So here we have suddenly, right now, today, you have massive urbanization across Central Asia. Look in Kazakhstan. They're building a whole new town down on the south in the border with Uzbekistan, whole new city. Now the question is, will that be another Dubai, another generic international place, or will it have something of the smell, the aura, the mood of Kazakhstan, and of a lesser extent of the Uzbeks who also live in that region? So this is the challenge. Are you going to build generic cities? They're talking about a whole new zone of Almaty. Is this just going to be indistinguishable from what you'd find in Japan or Korea or the Middle East or Europe? Or will it have some distinctive quality that builds upon the tradition? Now, I don't mean just cliches. Okay, you can use some nice nomadic designs on the wall, or that's not what I mean. I'm talking about essential things. Now, nomads lived especially in round structures. This was how traditional Turkic nomads of Central Asia existed. They didn't build square yurts. They didn't call them yurts either, of course, but that's a detail. They lived in round structures, and these beautiful fittings of these round structures were designed for the roundness. It was all centered on the hearth in the middle. Show me one piece of modern architecture anywhere in Kazakhstan that evokes this reality. And yet this is deep in the culture. It's deep within even younger people. They don't know it's there, but it's there. It's part of what they've inherited. Are we going to throw this away? Build something that is simply generic, global monoculture? Or is it going to have something deeply Kazakh about it, or Uzbek, or Kyrgyz, or Tajik, or Turkmen? If someone were to ask me what are the distinctive features of Kazakhs, first, I should refuse to answer because I really don't know. There are many. But if I was then forced to say something, I would say one is that Kazakhs, because of their geographical mobility during the nomadic centuries, because of this, they had to be very adaptable. And I would say that as a nomadic culture, deep heritage of nomadism, Kazakhs may be among the most adaptable and adroit, clever adapters in the world. They don't just adopt things from others. You lived under the Russian Empire for a long time, and then the Soviet Empire. You didn't adopt from them. You did adopt many things, we know that. But you also adapted. And the ability to adapt rather than just adopt is very rare in the modern world. And yet Kazakhs have it, and it's a great asset. It prevents them from becoming just generic, just another culture, another people. No, they're very distinctive because of their capacity to adapt what they borrow from abroad, not simply to adopt.